Dr. Eggert, let me continue with you. I'm assuming, coming from School of Mines, that you have, to a certain extent, tracked historical levels of mining activity throughout the country. Is that fair?
To some degree, yes.
Then, to the degree that you're able, can you give the committee any assessment in terms of what you have seen over a period of time, how mining activity and industry within the country has changed, and the reasons that we've seen decline or increase in certain areas? And I don't expect you to give me more than 45 seconds here, so if you can distill it, what changes we're seeing and why.
Okay. First, the level of investment in the mining industry tends to be very cyclical, both in the United States and elsewhere, and the United States in that regard has not been much different than other countries around the world. Having said that, the U.S. share of total worldwide mineral investment has, as a general rule, been declining. Part of that, I think, can be attributed to the more stringent environmental and other social permitting requirements necessary for mineral development. But also, to be fair, over the last several decades, a number of other countries have opened up their borders to mineral investment, areas that had been underexplored in the past, a past when Canada, the United States, Australia, South Africa were the major destinations of investment. So part of the decline in the U.S. share of investment, I think, has to be attributed to good opportunities elsewhere.
Let me ask you, Mr. Conrad, from the Alaska perspective, just some of the trends that we're seeing within the state in terms of the private investment that we recognize is key. You cannot make any of this happen unless you've got the investment side. What has helped to either bring new companies, new investment to the state? What has hurt investment opportunities within the mining industry?
Thank you, Senator Murkowski. Let me just give you an overview perspective that Bob Swenson provided to me in preparation for the hearing, and where he noted that the mining investment in Alaska right now is primarily on state and private land as opposed to federal land. And if you look at some of the figures that are provided in his testimony, you would note that the total area of state mining claims and prospecting sites for 2012 was about 4,500,000 acres, whereas the total area on federal lands for 2012 was about 168,000 acres. And that's attributable primarily from his perspective, and I think in general from Alaska's perspective, to the need for governmental support in supplying the kind of modern data that we need and do not yet have, land access, and then permitting efficiencies in terms of attracting investment. And when those things don't line up well, it has a negative impact on that investment activity.
One question, and this will be my last. I put it out to all of you. It's what I asked both on the first panel, and this was the issue of forecasting and trying to better understand what we might need in terms of these critical minerals. And again, recognizing that we're doing a lot of work to find substitutes, a lot of work to reuse, recycle, but the issue of being better able to forecast. Again, we've got different industries that are represented at the table here, but how can we do a better job of forward thinking in terms of being able to anticipate what it is that we will need so that we avoid the threat of an imminent crisis like we almost had with helium? And I'll throw it out to whoever wants to start. Mr. Isaacs, pick on you.
Well, we very much rely on the USGS and other expert sources of information. And again, we, as I mentioned earlier, we have an exercise called the International Technology Roadmap for Semiconductors, which includes a chapter that looks at emerging materials that will be critical to the next generation of semiconductors. So that's our attempt to forecast for the future. And what we'd like to do is integrate that effort with the exercise under this bill to identify the materials that are most critical for our industry and develop the appropriate policies to avoid vulnerabilities going forward.
So, Mr. Sims, from the producer's side, you know, you're getting push from industry that says we need it, we need it. How do we get more folks like Molycorp engaged?
I think it's fair to say that at least in our little world of rare earths, that virtually all independent forecasts show significantly increasing demand for most of those. So the signals is out to us as producers to try to produce more and to try to do more recycling, which we're involved with, and some other technologies. Getting the capital, the private capital necessary to bring some of these projects online is difficult. We went through a several-year process of raising about over $1.5 billion, all in the private capital markets. That is not easy to do. But there are companies that are out there trying to do it right now, and a lot of it depends on the value and the perceived quality of the resource. But in terms of downstream forecasting of demand, anything the government can do that would help us in the private sector understand the broader perspective, that would be very helpful.
General Latif, from the defense side, the security side.
Well, Senator, the number of DoD weapon systems is small enough that it's not going to drive demand significantly for a lot of these materials. So I'll answer a different question, and that is that some of the weapon systems we have are so critically dependent on some of these materials for their performance. And so it is important to the DoD to know what future availability of these materials is going to be as they plan their weapon systems, which go out, as you know, for many years.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Ms. Thomas?
Yes, I'll just add that it would be extremely helpful to the automakers and our suppliers, and in providing information on availability, and allow us to identify risks early on and ultimately manage them properly.
Good, good. Dr. Eggert, you can wrap it up.
A supplementary point. I think many of the markets for the minerals and materials that we're talking about are not very transparent. The supply chain risks are often hidden because the final purchaser is 5 or 6 steps removed from the initial mining. And to some degree, now I don't want to overstate the point, but to some degree it's like what happened during the financial crisis. The risks were buried and not obvious to all involved. And through forecasting and scenario building, one can help make these supply chains more transparent and allow all participants to better manage their risks.
Well, that's an excellent point. It's a good way to end this conversation. The awareness of the significance of critical minerals in all aspects of our life, I think that is growing. But I do think that the legislation that we have presented before the committee here is one that will help us build on that. But the whole aspect of transparency and just how far removed throughout this chain you have the actual minerals themselves versus the application. And I think this goes exactly to what you were speaking of, Senator Manchin, when you asked, from semiconductor perspective or from the perspective of the auto industry, where you're getting your stuff from. Most of it's just so far removed that we just don't make that connection. We need to figure out how we better make that connection so that risk is fully informed. And with that, I thank you and thank all the members of the panel here this afternoon.
And I would just follow up.